Hi, and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads, where we are continuing in the Magic Circle by Katherine Neville. In our last video, well, first let me just address the elephant in the room. I've changed position in the location I'm at, hoping to get better lighting. I don't know about better sound, and it's probably not going to stay this way because I'm blocking a door. So in my room that I have, the space that I have to put the chair back where it was. But I do have some of my old sound equipment, which is minimal, but hopefully we can make this all work. And I do have to tell you, I miss that rocking chair on my back porch, but we're going to make it work. It's going to be successful and everybody's going to enjoy the story, right? Yes. All right. So we are in the Magic Circle by Katherine Neville. And in the last video, Ariel got Bambi very drunk so that she could basically interrogate her about everything she knows about Ariel's family history and the rune manuscript that she now has hidden at her place of work. But one of the things that she learned, and I'm going to kind of reread it just so I don't mess it up, is that a lot of the family history happened in Nuremberg, Germany. And she asks why, and Bambi says it is the world axis, Nuremberg, the spot where all geometric lines of power are thought to meet. And apparently there's 3 goddesses who are spinning a tapestry tale, and that is the tale of what will happen at the end of time. And then Ariel realizes the timing of everything and how it has aligned with Sam's disappearance. I believe it was 7 years ago. So that's where we begin this video. In the pre-dawn light, the expanse of snow glimmered an eerie bluish white against the backdrop of dark and sinister woods. So she's supposed to be meeting him on a mountain slope at dawn. The moon still hung like an ornament in a star-spangled Prussian blue sky. The air smelled cold and dangerous, as it always did at this time of year, just before dawn. It had continued snowing well into the night, and there were no fresh tracks in the meadow. I skated to the center of the open space, whipped backward on my skis, and peered into the woods. Just then, a snowball struck me in the back with enough force to knock my cap loose and send a cold shower down my neck. When I turned, I saw a form cut briefly from the forest line. It passed for a flicker through the moonlight and then slipped back into the woods. But one upraised arm told me it was Sam and that I should follow him. I grabbed my hat, stuffed it in my pocket, 2-footed it across the pasture, and plunged in among the mesh of silvery fir and birch where I'd seen him vanish. I stopped to listen. An owl hoot came from up a slight embankment, so I followed it deeper to where the darkness was nearly impenetrable. When I stopped again, unsure where to go next, I heard his whisper close by. Ariel, take this and follow me. I felt him take me by the wrist and place the basket of his ski pole in my hand, and he went before me in darkness. With my 2 poles clutched in my other hand, I followed blindly, unable to see where he was leading me. We slalomed, a form of skiing downhill, through trees for a long while, then started our ascent to the high meadow. When at last we came out into the wide space, the sky had lightened to cobalt blue, and I could almost make out Sam's outline ahead of me. He swung around on his skis and slipped his ski tips between mine like interlocked fingers. And he threw his arms around me just as I'd done to him on that mountain nearly 18 years ago. He smelled of leathery tanned skin and wood smoke. He buried his face in my loose hair and whispered, "Thank God, Ariel, you're alive. You're safe." "No thanks to you," I muttered against his shoulder. Then he held me away and peered at me in the pre-dawn darkness. The only light, the milky moon glow, and that strange shimmer from snow beneath. I hadn't seen Sam in more than 7 years. He was still so boyish then. It should have occurred to me that he might have changed in all that time. But here he stood, tall, broad-shouldered, ruggedly good-looking, with Ernest's chiseled profile, his mother's long dark hair tumbling about his shoulders, and the mysterious beauty of those silvery eyes that seemed to be lit from within. I realized with discomfort that this was no longer my youthful mentor and blood brother who stood before me, but an incredibly handsome man. And the surprised way Sam was looking at me just now told me that his reaction to me must be pretty much the same. "What happened to that little string bean with the scuffed knees who used to follow me around everywhere?" he said with a strangely awkward smile. "Good Lord, hotshot, you're a knockout." "You almost knocked me out with that snowball," I said, feeling just as awkward. I actually found it hard to look at Sam until I could get used to the idea that he and I were suddenly completely grown up. "I'm sorry," he said, still regarding me as if I were almost a stranger. "I feel that's all I can say to you anymore, Ariel. How truly sorry I am that all this has happened. How sorry I am that I ever got you involved." "Sorry doesn't help," I said, quoting Jersey's line once again, but I smiled and he smiled back. Then I knew I had to tell him at once. "Sam," I said, "I have something to be sorry for too. Something I'm sorrier for than I've ever been about anything in my life. I hope it hasn't ruined everything for you or put us both in greater danger. But I've done something really stupid and foolish and awful and wrong. I left someone else alone all night with the rune manuscript." Sam had been looking at me with a growing expression of horror as I read out this lengthy litany of abstract remorse until I got to the specifics at the end. And then the surprise was mine. And mine. "What rune manuscript?" said Sam. All right. I had this really interesting fantasy that if my heart took enough of these sudden deep plunges into my lower abdomen, it would sooner or later stop ticking altogether and just keep bouncing up and down like a yo-yo. But a few miles of Nordic skiing with Sam through the high meadows worked like a thorax message. By the time we reached the cabin, I was okay, or at least I'd regained my ability to speak. And I'd learned the reason Sam had changed our meeting plan for today. He'd felt himself in enough danger lately to avoid hotels. So ever since his death, he'd been sleeping in hunting cabins, duck blinds, and field lean-tos scattered all over Idaho, abandoned or in disuse at this time of year. Arriving at Sun Valley a bit earlier than I, Sam had learned there wasn't that sort of shelter near the ski mountain, so he'd scouted until he found this one, about a 2-mile ski from the main road. But most of the area was so open, I could easily have been tailed, unless I arrived so early there was barely light enough to see. Once we'd reached the deserted cabin where Sam spent the night, we snapped off our skis, banged the snow from our bindings, planted our skis and poles in the snow around back, and went inside, where Sam stirred up the dying coals of last night's fire and threw on a few more logs. The place had no other heat, nor any plumbing, only pump water just outside the door. Sam jacked the handle to fill a tin pot with water, put it on the fire for instant coffee, and drew up a stool beside the rump-sprung chair where I'd already taken a seat. Ariel, I know you may not understand a lot of what I've done or why I've done it, he began. But before I begin to explain about all that's happened, I need to catch you up on last week. Why didn't you show up for our phone call? What you know about the missing package and whatever you've learned so far from Laugh. All right, I agreed reluctantly, despite the million questions I needed to ask. But first, if you didn't send the manuscript I spoke of, then I need to know something right now because I've met someone who told me he sent it to me himself. Have you ever heard of Dr. Wolfgang K. Hauser? Seeing Sam's quick twist of a smile, I added, so you do know him. But Sam shook his head. It was just, I don't know, I guess it's just the way you said his name. Sam was looking at me with an oddly closed expression. I think I imagine you always as my little blood brother, my twin soul, he went on. But just now I felt, what I mean is, who exactly is this guy, Ariel? Is there something going on here you'd like to tell me about? I could feel the hot blood suffocating my face. That damned Irish skin I'd inherited from Jersey showed every pulsating emotion the second it happened. I put my hands over my face. Sam reached over and pulled them down. I opened my eyes. Good Lord, Ariel, are you in love with him? He said. He jumped up and started pacing around in a circle, rubbing his forehead with his hand, while I sat there, not having a clue what to say. Sam sat down again and leaned toward me with urgency. Ariel, apart from anything else I may privately feel about the situation, this is hardly the moment for a blossoming romance. You said you've just met this man. Do you know anything about him at all? What's his background? Have you any idea just how dangerous this untimely friendship of yours might prove to us both? I was so upset by this outburst, I felt like throwing something at him. I jumped to my feet just as the coffee pot boiled over. Sam grabbed a glove to rescue it from the fire. This gave us both a quick moment to settle down. I didn't say I was in love with anyone, I told Sam in the calmest voice I could muster. You didn't have to, said Sam. He was fiddling with the coffee pot, not looking at me. Then he turned so I couldn't read his face, and he started to measure instant Java into cups. As if he were speaking to himself, he finally said, I've only just realized that I understand your emotions right now, far better than I seem to understand my own. When he turned back to me with the 2 cups of coffee, he was wearing a slightly strained smile. He handed me my cup and then ruffled my hair as he used to when we were kids. God, I'm sorry, sweetheart, he said. I have no right to tell you who to care for or to cross-examine you the way I've just done. I guess I was surprised, that's all. But you're smart enough not to fall for someone who might put us both in danger. And who knows, maybe there's some link in this situation that will help us out of the mess I've gotten us into, once we can figure it out. But by the way, this Wolfgang K. Hauser, I'm simply curious. Did he tell you what the K stands for? Surprised, I shook my head. No, he didn't. Why? Is it important? Probably not, said Sam, but the next time you see him, you might just ask. Now, let me hear your story about this past week. So, I took a deep breath and we sat down again. And I filled Sam in on everything that had happened. Well, almost everything. After Sam's reaction to the way I'd even spoken Wolfgang's name, I did leave out the detail that he'd spent the night with me as well as with the manuscript. But about all the rest, I was straight. By the time I'd finished the exhaustive summary, I myself had begun to see just what a pivotal role Wolfgang Hauser seemed to play in the story. But maybe that was because, so far, the plot had hinged on the wrong parcel. The real parcel sent by Sam remained missing. I was about to find out just how dangerous it really was. I can't believe it's still missing, said Sam grimly, reading my thoughts, but there's something here that just isn't adding up. I asked Sam why the contents of the missing parcel were so valuable that everyone on the planet seemed to be after it, including members of our own family who hadn't spoken to one another in years, and so dangerous he'd had to fake his own death. If I knew all the answers, said Sam with a grim smile, we wouldn't need to be holed up here in an isolated cabin just to speak to each other after a week of having to mess around with secret codes. Mess around, I said in frustration. You're the one who's been messing around with your rigged funerals and biblical anagrams and secret meetings. But after what I've been through this past week, I want answers and I want them right now. What's in that missing package and why did you send it to me? It's my inheritance, said Sam, as if it were clear. Please listen to me, Ariel. You must understand everything I have to tell you. 7 years ago, just before he died, my father told me for the first time what Pandora had left him. He'd never discussed it before, he said, because by the terms of Pandora's will, he'd agreed to keep the bequest confidential. So father put it in a box in a bank vault in San Francisco, where our family's law firm was located. When father died, I retrieved the box and brought it here to Idaho to study. It contained many old, rare manuscripts Pandora had collected over her lifetime. The package I sent to you contained copies of these. Copies? I cried. You had to fake your death? Our lives are in danger over a bunch of duplicates of something? These are the only copies, Sam said a bit impatiently, it seemed to me, for someone who'd taken so long to explain himself. When I said the originals were old and rare, I should have said ancient. They were stored in a hermetically sealed box against decomposition. The scrolls are made of papyrus and linen, or of metals like copper or tin. A few are written on wood boards or metal plates. My judgment, based on the materials and language used, Greek, Hebrew, Latin, Sanskrit, Akkadian, Aramaic, and even Ugaritic, is that these manuscripts originated in many regions of the world and were written over a long span of time. I knew at once that what I held in my hands was incomparably valuable, but I also sensed, as my father might have said, that they were somehow dangerous. Many have disintegrated badly with age, nearly crumbling into dust, and can't be photographed easily without complicated, expensive equipment and process. So I've made copies of each myself by hand, a labor that's cost me many years, so I could begin to translate them. Then I put the copies in the vault and I hid the originals where I don't believe they'll be found. At least, certainly not until my translations into English are complete. And have you been able to translate many? I asked. Quite a few, Sam replied, but it's all an odd ragbag of seemingly unrelated things. Letters, stories, testimonials, reports, bureaucratic administrativia from imperial Rome, Celtic and Teutonic legends, descriptions of Thracian festivals and dinner parties in Judea, tales of pagan gods and goddesses from North Greece, and nowhere a thread that connects it all. Yet there must be something, or Pandora wouldn't have collected them to begin with. We're almost to a stopping spot. I know we're going a little bit long here. Okay. My mind was racing, but it was going in a circle. How could documents like these be connected to the neo-Nazi conspiracy plot I'd expected after listening to Laugh and Bambi? All the events they described happened in the last century, while languages like Ugaritic, so far as I knew, hadn't been spoken in millennia. I thought of the Norms in their hidden grotto inside that mountain at Nuremberg, weaving and spinning the fatal game plans for the world's last days. But what if no one could read it when it was done? As Sam took a swig of tepid coffee, I could sense the frustration a code breaker as good as he must feel at removing the skin of an onion and contemplating the layer remaining between each core. If you haven't been able to find any connection among these manuscripts of Pandora's after years of trying, I said, why does everyone think they're so valuable and dangerous? Could they be related to the objects in the Hofburg, the ones everyone says Hitler was trying to collect? And there's not a natural stopping spot, but that's a good question, and we're going to stop there. All right. Whew. Lots going on. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.